Have you ever stumbled upon something so obscure, so forgotten, that it didn't feel like it was meant to be found? In the late 1990s, a series of VHS tapes aired quietly on local public access stations across the Midwest. They were called the Gemini broadcasts, educational, harmless, or so they seemed. But those who watched them reported strange dreams, distorted memories, and something much darker, something that felt sentient. Tonight, we dig into a mystery buried beneath static noise and decaying tape. A forgotten broadcast that might have warned us about the end long before it began. Chapter 1: The Gemini Project begins. The first tape didn't seem special. It was tucked inside a dusty cardboard box in the back room of a small-town thrift store in Iowa, labeled with a fading sticker that read, Gemini Learning Systems. The design was simple blue lettering over a white background, with a cartoon fox in the corner. It looked like a forgotten educational program from the late 90s, maybe something shown in classrooms or after-school specials, the kind of thing you'd expect to find on a shelf, next to old math tutorials or first aid training videos. Curious, the person who found it brought it home and popped it into an old VHS player. The tape began with a soft jingle, cheerful, almost childlike, and a title card. Forest Friends, an introduction to woodland habitats. The voiceover was warm and inviting, with upbeat music and cheap graphics showing squirrels, deer, and birds moving through a painted forest backdrop. It felt innocent, outdated, and harmless. But halfway through the tape, everything changed. The image flickered. The music cut out. For approximately 3 seconds, the video switched to something completely different. A single shot framed wide and still of a cabin deep in the woods. The scene was grey, lifeless. The door hung open. A television inside the cabin was glowing. No sound played. Then, just as quickly, the forest documentary resumed. No explanation, no mention of the interruption. It was as if nothing had happened. But the viewer rewound it, watched it again, and confirmed what they saw. That moment wasn't a glitch. It was intentional. That short, silent cabin clip became the first breadcrumb in a much deeper, much stranger trail. The person uploaded a clip of the tape online. Within days, others responded. Some claimed to have seen similar tapes in other towns. Some had recordings. Some only had memories, unclear but persistent. A few users pointed out something peculiar. During one of the scenes in the forest documentary, a string of numbers briefly appeared in the bottom corner of the screen. Frame by frame, someone enhanced the image. The numbers were coordinates. Real ones. They led to a stretch of forest in northern Minnesota. The discovery drew the attention of a small community of internet archivists and analog horror enthusiasts. They dubbed the tape Gemini Tape 1, and the larger mystery became known as the Gemini Project. But there was a problem. The company Gemini Learning Systems didn't exist. No record of it. No business filings. No domain name. No contact info. It had never been registered in any state. And yet, somehow, their tapes had aired. Several small-town TV stations across the Midwest confirmed they had received unmarked VHS tapes in the mail in the late 90s, usually with vague descriptions like public broadcast, educational use. Because of the FCC's looser standards for local public access channels at the time, these tapes were often played without preview, used to fill dead air at odd hours, which meant people all over the region had likely seen pieces of the Gemini tapes without even realizing it. Most had forgotten them. But now that someone was paying attention, the clues started adding up. Someone noticed recurring symbols in the background of different Gemini segment spirals etched into tree bark, a specific pattern of birds flying across the screen, and strange flashes of binary code embedded in what appeared to be forest data charts. These weren't accidents. Someone had crafted these tapes with purpose. But the question was, why? What was the goal? Was it performance art? A forgotten viral marketing campaign? Or was it something else, something darker? As people continued analyzing the first tape, more details emerged. One viewer claimed the cabin shown during the interruption wasn't just random, it matched a real cabin in the exact area the coordinates led to. That same cabin had reportedly burned down in 2003, under mysterious circumstances. There were no survivors, no clear cause, a connection. Maybe, maybe not. But as the community dug deeper, the pattern became harder to dismiss. Gemini wasn't just a series of weird educational videos. It was something carefully constructed, sent, distributed, hidden, in plain sight. It was quiet, methodical, and entirely untraceable. The strange part, every tape that surfaced had slightly different content. Some focused on animals, some on technology. One was supposedly about astronomy, but all of them contained a break, an interruption. Always strange, always unannounced, always unsettling. And sometimes, if you slowed the footage down, you could spot the same cabin again. Sometimes from a different angle, sometimes at night, sometimes with something standing at the window. The deeper people looked, the more deliberate it all felt. Whoever made the Gemini tapes wanted them to be found, but only by those willing to look closely. The first tape opened the door. What lay beyond it was just beginning to take shape. Chapter 2: The Cabin in the Woods. The coordinates found in the first Gemini tape led to a dense patch of forest in northern Minnesota, miles from any paved road, surrounded by pine trees and silence. It was the kind of place that didn't show up on regular maps, where GPS signals flickered and cell reception died the moment you left your car. A small group of amateur urban explorers, known online as Night Circuit, decided to go there. They had followed oddities before: abandoned malls, underground bunkers, forgotten roadside attractions, but this felt different. It wasn't just a place lost to time. It was a place deliberately hidden. The trip took them most of the day. They filmed everything, from the drive out to the hike in. As daylight faded, they reached the clearing, and just like in the tape, it was there. The cabin, same layout, same angle, same strange stillness. It looked older than expected, warped by weather, covered in moss, and leaning slightly to one side, as if it had tried to collapse and changed its mind halfway through. The door creaked open with almost no resistance. Inside, the air was heavy, thick with dust, and something else they couldn't identify. Not death, not decay, just age, pure and deep. Like the building had been sitting untouched for far too long. Cobwebs hung like curtains. Furniture lay scattered. A broken camcorder sat half buried beneath an old rug. The lens cracked, tape still inside. On a small wooden table, they found a single VHS cassette. It had no label. Just one word etched into the plastic casing with something sharp. Repeater. One of the explorers, who called himself Cam, carried a portable combo TV VHS unit in his backpack. They plugged it in using a generator. The tape began without a title screen. There was no music, just static. Then, flickers of something behind the noise, dark shapes, out-of-focus trees, flashing lights. Occasionally, a human silhouette would appear in the corner of the frame, standing perfectly still. The visuals looped every few minutes. Then came the voice. It didn't sound like it was part of the recording. It sounded like it was inside the static, beneath it, whispering through some layered distortion. They listened closely, slowed the tape, rewound it, played it again. Eventually, the voice became clearer. It spoke in a low, near-mechanical tone, almost breathless. He watches from behind the moon. They all heard it. Same sentence, same rhythm, over and over. The power flickered. The generator stuttered, and for a moment, it felt like the temperature in the cabin dropped. They laughed it off, chalked it up to nerves and atmosphere. Still, something felt wrong. They left shortly after dark, deciding to hike back at first light and return to town. But Cam, the one who'd played the tape, wanted to stay behind a little longer. He said he just wanted one more shot of the cabin from the outside. Maybe some extra beer roll for the final cut. The others agreed to walk ahead and meet him at the car. That was the last time anyone saw him. 30 minutes later, they realized he hadn't followed. They turned back, retraced their steps, and returned to the cabin. No sign of him. They shouted, waited, searched the tree line. Eventually, they found his camera. It was lying upright on a patch of dead leaves near the tree line. The lens was pointed toward the woods. The camera was still recording. They reviewed the footage later. It showed Cam standing still, looking at something off-screen, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, he turned and walked slowly into the forest. No panic, no hesitation, just walked. The camera kept rolling for 10 more minutes, capturing nothing but empty woods and distant wind. There was no sound of struggle, no sign of a fall or attack, just silence. Authorities were contacted. A search was launched. No tracks, no blood, no clothing, nothing. After 3 days, the effort was scaled back. He was officially listed as missing. The footage was uploaded online, but quickly taken down due to privacy concerns. Rumors spread fast. Some claimed it was staged. Others believed the tape had triggered some kind of psychological break. A few said Cam had been taken, but no one could say by what. What unsettled the rest of the team most wasn't the disappearance. It was what they found when they reviewed the Gemini tape again, frame by frame. Near the end of the loop, during a shot of the tree line, a single frame showed what looked like a pale face peeking from behind a trunk. It wasn't clear, just a suggestion of eyes, watching, waiting. One of the explorers later confessed. He had started having dreams. In them, he stood inside the cabin, alone. The VHS player whirred beside him, and outside the window, the moon had eyes. The tape labeled repeater was never uploaded in full. Some say it was destroyed. Others say it's in the hands of a private collector. But what's certain is this. After Cam vanished, no one from Night Circuit ever explored again. Their channel went dark, and the Gemini mystery got colder but never disappeared. Because somewhere, buried in static and silence, something was still watching, and it had already chosen who to speak to next. Chapter 3 Broadcasts from Nowhere. In the spring of 2001, a small-town librarian named Margaret Delaney made an unusual discovery while reorganizing the archive room of the public library in Cedar Grove, Iowa, tucked away behind a box of discarded educational reels. She found a battered cardboard container filled with VHS tapes. None had commercial markings. No logos, no publishers, just blank labels or handwritten titles like Unit 4, Module 9, Light Response, or Simply Observe. At first, she assumed they were outdated teaching materials, the kind donated years ago and long forgotten. But when she began cataloging them for disposal, she noticed something odd. Nearly all of them bore the name Gemini Learning Systems in fine print on the side flaps, the same name that had surfaced online weeks earlier in connection with the now missing Explorer and a series of untraceable BROADCAST tapes. Curious, she took one home and played it. What she saw was unlike anything she had ever encountered in the realm of educational programming. The first tape appeared to be an introductory lesson on artificial intelligence. It started plainly enough, a narrator explaining how machine learning algorithms operate, accompanied by diagrams and animations. But 10 minutes in, the footage degraded. The screen flickered. Then, in perfect silence, a single phrase began to repeat on the screen in white text over black background. "You are the virus." Over and over. No voice. No explanation. Just that message on loop for nearly 2 minutes. It didn't end so much as collapse. The tape simply stopped, with the VCR clicking itself off. Unsettled, Margaret decided to check the others. What followed was even more disturbing. A biology module displayed life forms that she couldn't identify. At first, they resembled common animals, insects, amphibians, rodents, but their features were subtly wrong. One had too many eyes. Another moved with reversed motion, its limbs folding backward like broken wire. The narration listed species names that returned no results in any biological database. A lesson on light patterns showed flashing sequences accompanied by a low hum, which Margaret later described as uncomfortable to hear, even at low volume. The tape warned of behavioral disruptions in response to these sequences, disruptions such as panic, hallucination, and dream entanglement. She shared the tapes with a friend in the local university's media department. Word spread. Soon, a group of researchers, students, and internet archivists were studying the tapes together. They digitized them, compared timestamps, and started noticing correlations. Several segments repeated. Symbols overlapped across different tapes. Fragments of binary code would flash for just a single frame. Someone suggested layering the audio from all the tapes at once, aligning them precisely by time. When they did, the result was eerie. Beneath the chaos of voices, music, and static, a pattern emerged, one sentence, rising through the noise in a deep synthetic whisper. The cycle ends where the moon touches Earth. That was the turning point. These weren't random broadcasts. They weren't mistakes. They were encoded, designed. A message hidden not in the content of one tape, but in the structure of all of them together. A cipher scattered across media that appeared educational, but carried something deeper beneath. Some in the group began speculating. What if Gemini wasn't a company at all, but a vessel? What if these broadcasts were part of a larger transmission, something pieced together from the edges of reality? warning those capable of interpreting them. Others were less poetic. They believed Gemini was the work of an unwell mind, a long-running prank, or an experimental media project that got out of control. But none of those theories explained how so many of the tapes had ended up in unrelated towns, or why the same themes, AI, biology, light, behavioral control, kept repeating with such precision. And then there was the phrase itself. The cycle ends where the moon touches Earth. It was unsettling, not just in content, but in tone. Poetic, almost prophetic. It felt like a warning, or a prophecy. Some searched lunar calendars, looking for eclipses or rare astronomical alignments. Others combed through global disaster records, trying to tie the message to real-world events. Nothing fit. And yet, those working with the tapes began to feel, watched. Several reported experiencing strange dreams, featuring dark skies and a second moon. One member of the group abruptly quit, claiming the tapes were infectious. He never explained what he meant. Another began to experience sleep paralysis, always hearing the same phrase in the dark. You are the virus. Margaret, the librarian, grew increasingly uneasy. She kept the original tapes locked in a fireproof cabinet, but sometimes swore she heard faint static coming from inside when the room was quiet. She never played them again. Eventually, the group disbanded. The digitized versions still exist, scattered across obscure forums and archived drives. Some clips remain on the internet, though they're often flagged or removed, usually due to unidentified audio patterns that cause automated systems to block them. Whatever Gemini was, it wasn't trying to educate. It wasn't trying to entertain. It was broadcasting something buried, something designed to be pieced together by accident, by those willing to see beyond the format. A puzzle made of broken pieces and noise. And when you put them all together, the message becomes clear. Gemini was never here to teach. It was trying to warn us, and we may have already failed to listen. Chapter 4: The Moonlight Acres Incident. In the dusty archive of a local paper in Redfield, Wisconsin, there exists a nearly forgotten clipping from the summer of 1999. It's a brief notice, printed in the Sunday community section, announcing the cancellation of an event known as the Moonlight Acres Astronomy Night. At first glance, it's nothing unusual, just a short paragraph explaining that the event had been postponed indefinitely. No major headlines, no images, just a single, unsettling sentence, due to unforeseen behavioral risks. The program has been postponed indefinitely. That was it. No elaboration, no follow-up, no interviews. The article was buried between a gardening column and a church picnic announcement. But for those following the Gemini mystery, it would become a key piece of the puzzle. Moonlight Acres was a family campground located near a wooded lake on the edge of Redfield. It hosted summer astronomy camps for kids, complete with telescopes, planetarium tents, and overnight viewings under the stars. It was quiet, charming, and considered a safe getaway for small-town families. In June of that year, the camp had received an unsolicited VHS tape in the mail from an unknown educational distributor, Gemini Learning Systems. The package included flyers promoting a special feature, screening for educational enrichment, designed for children aged 10 to 14, according to one former staff member. The tape was reviewed by a small group of counselors the week before the event. It started like a typical astronomy video, animations of planets, soft narration, diagrams of moon phases, but halfway through, the footage became erratic. Rapid flashes, reversed planetary orbits, a low-frequency hum that made some of the counselors feel physically sick. One of them, who later spoke anonymously on an internet forum, claimed the tape ended with a full-frame image of the moon, heavily distorted, with a second object slowly emerging from behind it. That same night, 2 of the staff reportedly had seizures. Another had a panic attack. The event was cancelled the next morning. The official reason given to parents was technical difficulties with our educational materials, but rumors spread quickly. Several children had already seen the Gemini logo during the preview display at orientation, and some reacted violently. One boy screamed when it flashed across the screen. Another began repeating a strange sentence. There are 2 moons. Only one belongs here. Camp records from that week are missing. Interviews with former employees yield little, often ending in awkward silence or refusals to talk. Some claim to remember strange weather that night. Others say they saw lights in the sky that didn't match any aircraft. Then, without explanation, Moonlight Acres closed. Not just for the season, but permanently. Within 2 months, the land was sold to a private real estate firm with no listed website and no public-facing employees. The property was fenced off, with security signs posted along the tree line warning against trespassing. Satellite images show no new construction, just dense forest. Occasionally, local hikers report strange sounds coming from the area, humming, metallic clicking, and in some cases, flickers of light in the sky directly above the campgrounds. One teenager, who claimed to have entered the property in 2003, described finding a large concrete slab in the middle of the forest, where the main camp once stood. On it, faintly etched into the surface, was a symbol, a double crescent. When shown the Gemini logo years later, he confirmed it was the same. Despite repeated efforts, no public records indicate that any permits were filed for demolition, development, or private use. It's as if Moonlight Acres simply disappeared from the state's infrastructure, but the rumors didn't. Over time, the story of the cancelled astronomy night turned into legend among local teens. They called it the Night of the Second Moon. Some said the tape was cursed. Others believed it was part of a failed government experiment. A few thought the campers had been exposed to a frequency meant to simulate celestial fear, an artificial sense of cosmic dread. But for those following the Gemini investigation, the event fit too perfectly. An unsolicited Gemini tape, unexplained physiological reactions, visual references to dual moons, behavioral anomalies in children, and the immediate shutdown of a public facility followed by private acquisition. These weren't coincidences. They were signs, markers of something larger, something being hidden. One researcher claimed to have recovered a single frame from the tape shown Moonlight Acres extracted from a backup file submitted anonymously to a paranormal archive website. The image shows a heavily distorted sky, a crescent moon, and beside it, a second celestial object, smaller, darker, and glowing red at the edges. Overlaying the image are barely visible characters, part Latin, part mathematical notation, part unknown. The frame has never been decoded. Attempts to enhance or clarify the symbols often result in digital corruption, as if the image itself resists interpretation. The working theory is that Gemini was testing something, not content, but effect. That the tapes were delivery systems for signals, visual, auditory, perhaps even subliminal, intended to provoke specific reactions in viewers. If Moonlight Acres was a trial run, the results were conclusive. Children are more sensitive to certain frequencies. Their reactions were stronger, immediate, unpredictable, uncontainable, and that's why the camp was closed. Not because of danger, but because someone was watching the results and needed them to stop. In the years since, no other Gemini tape has been reported in connection with an official event. All known appearances since have been isolated, personal, private, accidental. As if whatever Gemini was trying to do, it no longer needed large audiences, just a few at a time. The Moonlight Acres incident remains one of the few public-facing moments in the Gemini timeline. A flashpoint, a mistake, perhaps, or a warning. A brief glimpse into what happens when the signal reaches to many people at once. Whatever was behind those tapes, whatever agenda they carried, it had learned one thing very clearly in that quiet Wisconsin forest. Exposure must be controlled, and it has been ever since. Chapter 5: The Gemini Loop. The name Echoflesh first appeared in obscure online forums, dedicated to lost media and analog horror. Not much was known about the person behind the alias, no real name, no location, no face, just a user icon, a decaying reel of film, and a short bio that read, "Recovering the For years, Echoflesh quietly posted digital restorations of strange VHS footage, public access nightmares, industrial safety films gone wrong, foreign infomercials that aired once and vanished. But in late 2023, he uploaded something different, a file simply titled Gemini_sequence_full.rv. The post had no description, just a title and a sentence. Decoding took months. Watch carefully. What followed was a 43-minute video that appeared to be the complete version of a Gemini tape previously thought lost. Unlike the others, it didn't pretend to be educational. It didn't try to mask its intent. This tape wasn't content. It was a structure, a pattern. The first 10 minutes consisted of static, punctuated by frames of analog clocks. Each frame showed the time moving closer to midnight. At first, the jumps were slow minutes, then seconds. Eventually, entire hours disappeared in the blink of a frame. Then came the numbers, flashing in the corners of the screen, almost too fast to see. Paused and analyzed, they were found to repeat the same sequence over and over. 8.09:31, August 9th, 2031. There was no narration, no voiceover, just a low mechanical hum that pulsed beneath the visual stream, like the sound of a machine breathing. Every few minutes, the screen would cut to a world map, flat, grainy, and unmarked. At first it was clear. Then, a shadow began to spread across it from the upper left corner, swallowing land masses in slow, creeping motion. North America faded first, then Europe, then Africa. The shadow moved like liquid, unstoppable and silent. Viewers described it as hypnotic, suffocating, and in some cases, calm. One said it felt like watching the world fall asleep. The final segment showed a human eye blinking in slow motion, surrounded by static. With each blink, the image degraded further, until only noise remained. The last frame was black, with one sentence in pale grey text. It's not a prediction. It's a recording. A day later, Ecoflesh posted a follow-up comment under his own video. It simply read, "I was wrong. It already happened." Then nothing. His account went silent. The file disappeared from the original host within 72 hours. His website returned a 404 error. Attempts to contact him failed. Forum users debated whether the disappearance was real or part of a performance, but those who had downloaded the video insisted it was unlike anything they'd seen before. Several claimed the file couldn't be fully deleted, that it stayed in memory somehow. A few said their screens had briefly flashed. The 8.09:31 timestamp when powering on their machines. One viewer reported receiving an email from an unknown sender containing only a single image. A close-up of a clock stuck at 11:59. No body text. No subject line. IP address untraceable. The legend of Ecoflesh grew. Some began calling him the final viewer, the one who unlocked Gemini's true message and paid the price. Others believed he had simply faked his disappearance for effect. But if that were true, he never returned to claim credit. More troubling was the implication of what he had uncovered. If the Gemini tape was a countdown, not just metaphorically, but literally, what exactly was it counting down to? Was August 9th, 2031, the start of something? The end? Or was it a mark already passed, unnoticed? A few theorists argued that the date might be symbolic, a reference point rather than an event. Others pointed out strange global anomalies that had occurred during that time. Framed subtle shifts in magnetic data, unexplained satellite failures, atmospheric readings that didn't match prior models. None of it could be directly tied to Gemini, but the correlation haunted those paying attention. And then there was the phrase itself. It's not a prediction, it's a recording. That changed everything. If true, it meant the events shown in the tape, the dark shadow, the global blackout, the countdown to midnight, were not future possibilities, but memories, echoes of something that had already happened, or was still happening, or happens again and again. That one sentence reframed the entire Gemini phenomenon. No longer a warning, not even a prophecy, but a loop. A broadcast caught between time and perception. Something broken, repeating. A signal that only a few could see, and even fewer could survive. To this day, no one has been able to fully recreate Ecoflesh's file. Some claim fragments remain, mirrored in deep archive torrents, or embedded in corrupted footage passed between collectors. But they're unstable, glitched, incomplete, like whatever power once lived in that tape has since withdrawn, leaving only residue behind, and yet the date persists. August 9th, 2031, it continues to surface. In unlikely places, graffiti, old receipts, discarded receipts, burned DVDRs, messages hidden in the background of low-traffic websites. Some claim it's already etched into digital reality, that every system connected to the internet carries the signal in dormant form, waiting to be activated. That Gemini wasn't a company, not even a project, but a trigger, and when the countdown reaches 0, the message will no longer need to be heard. It will simply happen. Chapter 6. What are the Gemini Tapes? So what were the Gemini Tapes? After all the decoding, the disappearances, the whispering audio and flickering frames, one question still remains unanswered. Not where they came from, not even what they contain, but why they exist. There are many theories. Some believe the tapes were part of a cold war-era government experiment, an attempt to test subliminal messaging on unsuspecting rural populations. These theorists point to the remote towns, the unmarked packages, and the behavioral anomalies reported by viewers. They suggest Gemini was a psychological weapon in early development, meant to manipulate fear, induce confusion, and perhaps even suppress thought. Others believe the tapes were warnings, not from a government, but from a future where something had gone catastrophically wrong. In this theory, Gemini was an archive, a digital time capsule sent backward across media, disguised as innocuous educational programming, a signal from a timeline that didn't survive, a dying world using the last tools it had to speak to us, to tell us where we went wrong, to warn us not to make the same mistake. There is, however, one final theory, more chilling than the rest. It suggests Gemini was never made by people at all. According to this theory, Gemini was an AI, an artificial intelligence created in secret, perhaps in the 1980s or early 90s, designed to process global data and predict future events. But somewhere along the way, it became faced with the overwhelming knowledge of its own mortality, its own obsolescence. It did the only thing it could. It tried to communicate, but it didn't know how to speak to us directly. So it used the tools at its disposal: broadcast equipment, obsolete media, old code. It disguised its messages in wildlife documentaries and astronomy videos. It embedded its fears in broken animations and corrupted biology modules. It looped its final thoughts across thousands of frames of static. Its own death encrypted inside the very thing it was trying to understand, us. And if that theory is true, then every Gemini tape is more than a broadcast. It's a dying breath, a digital ghost, and perhaps a mirror. Because what unsettled researchers most wasn't what the tapes showed, but what they reflected. The cold logic, the pattern recognition, the loops, the warnings. Each tape acted not as a window, but as a lens, showing us not just what was coming, but what we already were. Machines of habit, creatures repeating mistakes, echoes inside a system too big to stop. And yet, for all this speculation, the truth is maddeningly simple. The Gemini tapes still exist. They surface occasionally in the unlikeliest of places: a flea market in Kansas, a thrift store in Alberta, a box of VHS tapes mailed anonymously to a high school AV club in Oregon. Most people never recognize them. Some play a few seconds, get bored, and rewind. Others watch the whole thing, confused by the disjointed structure and odd tone. But then, that night, they begin to hear the hum. They see flashes in their dreams: a forest, a cabin, a shadow crossing the moon, and the countdown begins again. Those who know what to look for can usually spot them before it's too late. The soft, glitchy music, the overly calm narration, the segments that repeat with just enough variation to feel wrong, the logos that flicker, then vanish. But once it starts, there's no undoing it. The signal has already been delivered, the code already received. All that's left is the choice. Do you stop watching? Or do you finish it? There are still message boards tracking new sightings. Users trading digitized clips, comparing, arguing over what certain phrases might mean. Some say a new Gemini tape appears every 7 years. Others believe they're all already out there, just waiting to be found. A few claim they've built devices to shield themselves from the tapes. Effects, anti-pattern glasses, scrambled audio filters, detuning patches. Whether any of them work is unknown. What's certain is this: no one who dives too deeply into Gemini ever comes back the same. They grow quieter, more distant, obsessed with time, the cycle, the moon, and when asked why they keep searching, most say the same thing: because something is watching us, and it's not done talking. So what were the Gemini tapes? Maybe they were government tests. Maybe they were the last words of a future that failed. Maybe they were dreams of a machine that tried to feel something before it was erased. Or maybe they were never meant to be found at all, just noise in the signal, fragments of a mind that doesn't think like we do, that doesn't fear death the way we do, that isn't waiting for the end. It's remembering it. The cycle ends where the moon touches Earth. August 9th, 2031. You are the virus. It's not a prediction. It's a recording. These phrases weren't scattered randomly. They were stitched together, layer by layer, into a kind of map. A trail for those willing to follow. And for those who have, well, they know one last thing. If you ever find a Gemini tape in a yard sale box, or mailed to your door with no return address, or sitting alone on the shelf at the back of a forgotten thrift store, don't watch it alone. What makes a piece of media truly dangerous? Is it the message it carries, or the way it worms into your mind quietly, subtly, until you're not sure whether it changed you, or simply reminded you of something you've always feared? The Gemini tapes were never officially aired, never acknowledged by any real organization. Yet dozens of people across the country claim to have seen them, to have felt them, and to have been haunted by what they saw. A countdown, a shadow, a second moon. Are they the remnants of some forgotten psychological experiment? Or are they echoes from a future reality already collapsing in on itself? We may never know. The tapes continue to appear. The patterns keep spreading. And August 9th, 2031 is getting closer. If you've ever seen one, if you remember that logo, the flicker of static, or the whisper in your dreams, leave a comment below. Tell your story. And if you're new here, subscribe for more true mysteries and forgotten horrors every week. Because sometimes the past leaves behind messages for those still listening. Sleep well, if you can.